guests gathered here, one on my right-hand side, second on the left-hand. How handy is that? Right hand, left hand, that's beautiful. So allow me to quickly introduce them. Maybe first let's start with Laurent here. Laurent, very interesting development, because you've been involved in a business during the financial crisis, during the internet bubble, which you failed upon, which is great, because it marks that you've built some expertise that you can now leverage further, that you're still leveraging further. Then he established his own company, which is an advisory company, operating and advising, majority of the top tier companies from the let's call it real economy in terms of how to apply digital solutions. But not only that, he didn't settle for that. He also established one of the most prominent, one of the most exclusive fintech events in Europe these days, which is the Paris Fintech Forum, and you actually will have a chance to see a bit more about it. There are books outside, and actually we have the pleasure, the honor of partnering with them on this event. So Laurent is one of the key people running that event, which is, as I said, the most exclusive one, meaning the stage is occupied mostly, if not only, by C-level people, by CEOs and C-level.
Only CEO.
Exactly, only CEO. So an amazing thing. And then last but not least, you're also involved in an organization which is effectively gathering the payments industry in France. So an amazing story there. On my left-hand side, also an amazing story, different, but still with a great angle, representing UK, which is at the forefront of the fintech revolution, the most developed, the most mature, the most advanced jurisdiction. Sam Tidswell. Sam is, again, two roles. One is an impressive role. He's the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister's Business Ambassador for FinTech in the UK. Impressive stuff. And secondly, he also runs, he's the founder, he founded a company which is effectively an investment firm, a private equity innovation platform, operating in the growth and buy stage, operating out of New York and London. So, Sam represents the investor's mindset mixed with the governmental angle, and Laurent more the industry perspective with an advisor that is helping the industry. So, gentlemen, thanks again for being here. I think, to complete the introduction, because this is all about, introducing and giving people a bit of a perspective. Can maybe allow me to start with my right-hand side. We mentioned the fact that you're a veteran of the fintech landscape, which is great. So you lived through the bubble. Maybe let's go a bit back to what we discussed at the very beginning. If you can maybe elaborate a bit, Laurent, your perspective. I know you are always a big advocate of saying that fintech is not new. Fintech is rusty. It's an old concept. It's only been redesigned. Can we talk a bit about that? Why do you think that is the case? And secondly, if you can do a bit of a comparison, what are the differences today in fintech versus what you've seen during the bubble, and how relevant is it to what we've been discussing at the very beginning? Maybe let's kick off with that, and then we can continue the discussion.
Thank you very much, Marcin. So first, thank you very much for welcoming me here today. I'm very happy to be in Warsaw today for that. And you don't have to compare yourself to Money20. You are already very good, and be proud of what you are doing here. I listened to your nice introduction this morning. It was very interesting. I share most of your point of view, but of course with my very small white hairs, I was there a long time ago. So in 1999, I was the first salary guy on the payroll of a company called Z-Bank. You can go on Google, Z-D-E-B-A-N-K. We rose at that time 120 million euro. So just for you to see what it is in 1999, 120 million euro, usually when you go 15 years later with inflation, you just double the figures. The only neobank having rose the same amount today in Europe is Revolut last month. And you can also put Atom Bank last year, but with only one investor, which is BBVA. So it took 18 years to come back to the same kind of investment. So neobanks are not new, and it was a full bank with a full banking agreement, with all the right to do insurance, banking, everything. And quite at the same period, you had, for example, another good example who was on our stage 1 year ago, the CEO and founder of Self-Trade. Perhaps you remember that the finance industry was one of the first one with travel in the 90s, mid-90s, 95, 96, to break through the dotcom bubble, as you mentioned. It was a trading. Before 1995, when you wanted to buy a trade, a stock on the stock market, it was like 2 or 3 days to have your order. So imagine you want to buy something at $20, you don't even know what will be the price in 3 days. And what was very strange is all the stock markets of Europe were already digital since 1986. But for the front-end customer, it was still a fax and a paper machine. So thanks to internet, we had the real time. And also cut in the middleman, as we were discussing this morning. So you had plenty of new players. I don't know for Poland, but if you go in Germany, UK, France, Belgium, so many new players, almost one every 2 or 3 days. So we didn't have Twitter, we had Google, but it was beginning, so people don't remember, but it was huge. And just to give you an example, self-trade was sold a few months before March 2001, 1 billion. So fintech and bubble, it's already an old story. Of course, it was not real money, otherwise the guys perhaps wouldn't have been on my stage 1 year ago, he would be on an island, but it was paper money. And after March 2001, paper was nothing. So just remember, it's an old story. So you had trading. Beginning of the 2000, you had the neobanks like Z-Bank, but you had other one. And just to let you know, Z-Bank...
Which is the one you established?
So Z-Bank, it was not my project. I was the first Harry guy. Of course, I'm responsible like everybody for success and failure. But it was not my idea. But what was nice is at this time, that's a sign of a bubble, we were able to raise 120 million euro with just slides. I remember when we had the money, we had not even a roadmap. We had just slides. Yeah. So that was a bubble time, you can be sure of that.
Yeah. Which wouldn't be the case today.
Today it's not the case. I mean, VC, you can speak more about that, I'm sure, but VCs don't put 120 million just on a slide today. Yeah. So that's a big difference. But, so Z-Bank died 3 years later, I think, and just perhaps some key reasons. First, being right, not at a good time, is not being right. So even if you think you have something which can really disrupt the market, you have really to think what is your market today. 1999, 300,000 people only were connected to internet in France. 300,000, to broadband internet, sorry. And what is broadband internet in 1999? It's GPRS on your mobile phone, meaning what you don't accept to do anything. So that was just crazy. Crazy idea to do a digital bank. Only for people. Too early, just too early. And being right too early is not being right. Plenty of other good or bad reasons, too long to stay on that, but just to mention, you have the banking, you have also the credit. Very soon in the 2003, 4, 5, you have online credit. You can register a credit online and so on. It was not peer-to-peer, but it was online and digital credit. Still, you didn't see 10 years later big actors born at that time being king. Another thing were insurance market, not for the damage, but more for lifetime insurance, your savings. At that time, if you, for example in France, wanted to put your saving in the insurance market or banks, they were taking you like 3 to 5% just entry fees. So those guys arrived in 2001, we are not speaking of 2018, 2001, and they say it's free. Let's do it free, and let's make it transparent thanks to internet. Guess what? 18 years later in France, majority of the insurance market is still 3 to 5% with a big insurance. So, either perhaps not the good timing, not the good market. And then you had another big thing, which was a bit different in the success plan, was payment. Payment is not new. PayPal is an old fintech. Very successful old fintech. From 2000 to 2010, I'm sure you have seen so many business models coming to ask money, saying we want to be the new PayPal. So PayPal was a big one, but we had plenty of new actors in payment. And everybody is still speaking of mobile payment, but if you look really what changed in the last 18 years is not mobile payment. You have a lot of big successful stories behind, something that you don't see, it's below the water. Everything between banks, everything dealing between your cards and you. For example, just one example. 10 years ago, a company called Wirecard in Germany, I'm sure you know, Wirecard was valuated something like 500 million and came from the internet at the end of the 90s. Check on Google today what is the valuation, I think it's 13 billion. So, and they are not doing only, but they do a bit of mobile payment, but mainly they are doing acquiring and so on for big players like you have in
So I think your conclusion is that the times are better now. There's definitely a better landscape.
Exactly. It didn't work at the time, not because it was a bubble or whatever. Market was not ready. Yeah. Let's take among the very different parameters, 2 or 3. First, internet and broadband. In 1999, it was a concept. Today, you all have one or perhaps 2 smartphones on this table. Perhaps you don't listen to me, you are looking on Google, or you are doing a translation directly with your phone. We don't even need this headset, we have direct translation. So everybody has a smartphone with the power of a Cray computer in 1990. You have more power in your palm than what we are doing in the 90s to forecast meteor weather. That's crazy, and most of you play to Angry Birds with that, but we can do much more things with that. We can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So everything is go quick. We have the power, we have the broadband. Everywhere in Europe, I'm here, I'm using that. I don't pay, I mean, it's like, I don't know, 30 euro a month, and I have 100 gigabytes all over the world, in the States, here, whatever. Nobody checks that anymore. So you can do plenty of new business models just because of that. And secondly, where I don't agree at all with your morning presentation on one point, I agree with everything else.
Very good.
Everything else. But regulation. Regulation is a key factor for all, or most, perhaps not all, but most of the innovation you see today. Of course, it's sometimes difficult. Perhaps, I don't know Poland, perhaps it's a bit difficult to discuss with your regulator. But in France, for example, it was difficult a few years ago. It was better with UK, and thanks to Brexit, they tried to be better in France too. So you can not really discuss with a regulator and so on. But what you have to see is if PayPal exists so much is because we had PSD1 20 years ago. Then we had PSD2 now. Then we had DME2. We had DME1 in the 90s for PayPal, and we had DME2 in 2010. And we had so many new players in payment successful because of that. In the wealth management industry, MiFID 2 will be a big breakthrough. You will have plenty of new players thanks to the transparency of this industry with MiFID 2. GSP2 is a big one for payment, for neobanks and so on. So regulation is tough, clearly.
But it's key.
But it's key and it's driving a lot of innovation. I stop there because my...
No, definitely, and I think that's where, Sam, you can chip in. You're coming from a jurisdiction that has been most successful, let's face it, in terms of applying, in terms of fostering an ecosystem which is very friendly from a regulatory perspective. Can you give us a bit of a perspective on how that works in practice, A? B, if you can also revert to your experience as an investor. How, as an investor, are you guys obsessed with looking at a business through the eyes of regulations and its potential impact on the business case?
Yeah, sure, thank you, and thanks very much for having me, and thank you, Sonia, for a great keynote. I was in school during the 90s, so I can't profess. I feel a bit like an imposter, to be honest.
Thank you for mentioning.
But I've been lucky, and I've met some great people on the way, and I was blessed to have been part of the UK's rise and evolution, which combines a number of different things. I think both from an investment and innovation perspective, you've got to look at the key drivers. It was economic underperformance from 2008. It was new technologies, new business models, and new regulatory directives. And then, last but not least, customer empowerment. So the need to rebuild trust. When you look at all those things and you think about the pressures that the incumbent CEOs were under, they were being told to increase capital risk ratios, invest more in innovation, increase top line growth, cut costs, a whole load of things that conflicted with each other. All at the while, the regulator was trying to tighten up on existing practices, and the innovators were taking slithers of revenue and pioneering new models. Now, I agree to some extent that pioneers sometimes win and sometimes don't, and I think we've both been part of examples that haven't ended up being successful in the end, but they play a critical part in the ecosystem as pathfinders and ways to define new ways of doing things. In fact, earlier on, Vitol and I were talking about a non-fintech example, but Tesla. It may be that Tesla does not make it, but Tesla has played a critically important part in the industry, bringing the consumer and the sector to the forefront with electric vehicles. So if we look at the history of innovation and investment, but I think it took 400 years for paper money to actually take root in circulation. 400 years of some people using it, some people not. First adopters and the hype curve way back then. It took 4 years for Bitcoin's market cap to exceed JP Morgan's. Okay, so the rate of change has never been so fast. We've moved from the first mover piece and the pioneer piece to firms collaborating via the sharing economy. I think that was a very important shift for the consumer. The next big shift in my mind, and I'm slightly biased because Motor Partners is potentially pioneering a form of this model, is platform cooperation. That's the sharing economy for corporates. It's making sure that corporates and large firms and small firms come together to share best practice, to share the cost of R&D, to avoid duplication of R&D, because I know that Bradesco in Brazil is working on sandboxes like DBSs in Singapore, like RBSs in the UK. And so that, I think, will be the next frontier. How can firms be more responsible with their spend? How can they spend less but achieve more and do it together with non-competitive organizations?
Efficiency.
Exactly right. And that for me is going to be the next very exciting wave of investment. How can you get in early with greenfield projects that are being built by a consortium of people?
Yeah. Great point. And one question though on the back of that for both of you gentlemen. The consensus in the industry in Europe these days is more around asking the questions, will within fintech startups prevail? Is this a time where, because of the fact that there's more correlation, there is more a need to partner with traditional players, startups are becoming a bit obsolete. Their chances of succeeding are decreasing, because if they don't partner with a big institution, their ability to scale is very, very difficult. Do you agree with that? Do you think that where we are in the evolution of the fintech space, is it leaving less space for true startups? I mean, two guys and a dog setting up a business in their garage and trying to scale it to a global business. Is that gone for fintech, or is there still space? What is your view?
I mean, it depends what you call success. I mean, if the dream of everyone doing a fintech is being Steve Jobs, okay, less chance. But you can say that for any business, the last 50 years, any startup, all the business don't end like Microsoft and Apple. But you can have a lot of success working with others, working in partnership, as you mentioned, on open.
Yeah, but my question is, can you do it on your own? Is there still space for that?
For some kind of business, yes, but of course, on some spaces, it's already a long run. I mean, you have take the neobanks I was speaking about. You have already, for example, in Europe, Revolut and N26 taking the big part of the share. So it could be complex, but of course, you always have space for new disruptors. But please, again, on 100 startups, 99 will die, whatever the subject, could be fintech or whatever else, and the 1% left, 99% will work with incumbents. Being as a B2B player, as a partner player, or B2B2C, and then 1% of this 1% perhaps will be the king of its vertical, perhaps. But that doesn't mean that the other one is not a success. Let's give me just one example. Orange Company, which is present in Poland, by the way, changed radically at the end of the 90s, radically. What did they do? They bought so many companies. It was not fintech, it was telco tech. They paid with paper at the time where Orange share valuated like 200 euro, today it's 20. And they bought a lot of companies. You could say, many people say it was expensive. No, if you ask to the people today, the company Orange of today is a result of all those aggregation of startups of these days who transformed drastically the company. The CEO of those companies at this time, most of them are now at the management direction and so on. It changed drastically everything for the customer, for the company. Everybody has a good end at the end, even if perhaps the new telco operator is not the new king of the world.
Yeah. Sam, your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think the responsibility to create a fertile environment for startups and for new startups rests in two camps. First, obviously, you guys, the consumer, the entrepreneur, the innovator, going out there and actually doing it. But secondly, with the government and with industry, to make sure that there's a fertile environment. The UK has been good. You were kind enough to say it's been the best. There's other fantastic examples of monetary authorities that are doing great jobs, Singapore being one of them.
Yeah, true.
But what have we done? So in fintech, and actually you're right, it applies to all sectors, we created a trade body, of which I was part of the founding team, Innovate Finance, who are there to support the industry, to be the voice of the industry. Very important. The second part is having a regulator that believes in right touch regulation rather than light touch or too heavy. It is critically important that the regulator understands their influence on innovation. Project Innovate has a sandbox where you can test your product and solution in a safe environment. It has various cohorts and ways of interacting with startups to make sure that you do it right. And it was really encouraging to see that the KNF have opened a new fintech unit very recently, because it shows you're looking in the right way.
I think you mentioned a very important point. You know, regulators were used to preserving the status quo. Now the word of innovation becomes a part of their vocabulary, you know, their language, which I think is the biggest change. You know, especially in Poland, innovation was never a topic that a regulator would be responsible for. They were responsible to protect the consumer based on the existing status quo. So what you guys have done, you've effectively moved the needle in terms of the regulator becoming responsible, liable for innovation.
And perhaps this is a question for the audience. How easy is it to start a fintech business in Poland? Is it feasible? Is it quick? Is it an okay process to get a license? Does it?
Well, you know, you wouldn't. It depends on what subject matter you would want to create a business around. But you don't really need to obtain any licenses. You don't, in principle. So today, you know, the landscape in Poland is still relatively unregulated, or like light, as you called it, lightly regulated, overseen rather than fully regulated. I think now we're at the time where there is more of a discussion on should it be more regulated, or actually should it be more encouraged? Should there be some kind of a model created that allows these companies to test run some of their solutions in a sandbox environment?
Can I give you two examples? Two extremes. On the one hand, you have the UK, which I think is trying to do its best to create a fertile environment for organisations. On the other hand, you have China. And I hope this is chatting rules and no one's tweeting or uploading to LinkedIn. But China was a very appropriate regulatory environment when it began. You saw a big boom in peer-to-peer, in robo-advice and similar new pioneering technologies. The regulators now starting to clamp down. And what that's doing to a number of the successful businesses is squeezing them so tight that they're failing. And China has suddenly slowed down its growth in this sector because it felt it was too light, and it's then gone heavy-handed to compensate. And there are 1,000 good things I could say about China, but I think that's going to be one of their big challenges.
Remember, these guys are actually trying to prevent Bitcoin trading in the country, which is like massive in terms of the impact.
Potentially for the right principles.
Exactly, true. That's another topic.
If I may, but perhaps because I'm just other side of the channel compared to UK, but I think you don't necessarily need a very open regulation where anyone can do whatever he wants. What you need is possibility of communication. I do think that it's good, for example, that China is a bit... I was living in Asia, and I can tell you that it was a Far East, like Far West, a few 100 years ago in the States. But when you can do anything, that's good at the beginning. But when you begin to be big, you can be too big to fail. And that could be very dangerous. We are speaking of money. That's why banks are heavily regulated, because it can be very dangerous. So when it's a fintech has 100 customers, nobody cares. But if tomorrow you have millions like a bank, with big figures come big responsibilities. And that's normal to be regulated. You shouldn't be afraid of being regulated, but of course, it should be at a level playing field for the new players to be able to cope with this regulation. Where the regulator must embrace innovation, must listen. So sandbox is one way. You have other ways. For example, in France, we don't have sandbox, but we have a lot of interaction between the fintech and the regulators to promote innovation. For example, in PSD2, France is the first country putting in force PSD2 since January. You can have new players. We have already the first regulated PSD2 actors is French in Europe. So the thing is that the regulator of the banks must see that it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. At the end, it's an opportunity for more ideas, more innovation, more cooperation, a bigger market. At the end, it's a bigger market, so best thing for everybody in the room. But of course, that calls to transformation of the mindset. It's mainly the mindset, working together with outside people, open.
No, definitely, I think, spot on. And to pick your brain on that. So how do you see Poland in that equation? First of all, you guys are not involved in Poland. You only observe from outside. If you can give me a bit of a perspective, how you guys see Poland in the fintech landscape, that would be my first question. My second question would be, and I'm happy you connect these two, is what advice would you give to Poland based on how you see it in order to intensify, magnify its visibility, impact, and ability to grow in this, as we've all agreed, very prosperous and developing space of the financial services. Maybe over to you. Maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, from the outside, I think Poland's a bit of an unsung hero. There's a huge amount of potential that's potentially not being tapped yet, but yeah, outside looking in, it's a great region. I have a number of colleagues that have done investment deals here, that have done partnerships here. You've got a fantastic technology resource and talent pool, and a whole host of attributes. And I think the KNF's great work is going to add to that. If you think about, again, back to history, the journey that certainly I've observed with Poland from the outside looking in, mBank from, I don't know, 1986, I think, 87, was a great example of a very successful and world-recognized digital bank. That was a long time ago. That was over 30 years ago. And then all the way to today, banks like Alior, who have an incredible partnership and collaboration model, are also seen the world over as pioneers of new models. So, look, in short, the last 30 years, I think you've demonstrated a huge propensity for innovation for a nation of 40 million people. But the next step, which is the important bit, is globalization. How do you make sure that Poland is recognized on the global stage? And I firmly believe that you do that through these platform corporations, through working with other large global brands to punch above your weight, because I think Poland can.
Beautiful, thank you. So all about cooperation.
Yeah, so for the Paris FinTech Forum, we received, for example, last year 800 applications from 52 countries. Difficult to have from Poland, we had some, but guess what? Most of them, they had the UK flag on it. Because even if it's a very nice Polish entrepreneur doing it, they prefer in Europe to have their home office, the business headquarters, in UK. So another thing is, so if you think about it, Polish as a fintech nation is not really recognized or seen like that. You have really to dig in to do your homework and say, oh, that's a Polish company.
Yeah.
It's island. On the other side, when you discuss with many fintech entrepreneurs, they all work with Poland. Your IT guys are everywhere. I mean, everybody has someone working with a supplier which is in Poland. You have very good engineers, cheap compared to the rest of Europe. They work well and good results. If you take, for example, the aggregators, most of them have the business done there. And at the end, you don't have any aggregators working with PSD2 here. That's quite strange. Another thing is mBank, which is not a fintech, but quite a very big digital bank. They are very well known abroad, taken as an example many times, and they are working with big banks in different countries, and also fintechs. For example, mBank is working with Meniga, which is a big player in Iceland, also with a UK flag, but it's an Iceland company. And there was the first one to work with them, and now many guys recognize all over Europe. They just signed a deal with BPC, which is the 9th largest bank of Europe, for example. And
what should we do more of? What should we
just
do
to finish on that point, Polish market is recognized by everyone in Europe as a big, very interesting market. When you look at in the Europe map, where should I develop my company when I'm digital? You look for UK, of course, big market, very digital. Germany, France, and Poland is not far behind, because you have well-educated market, open to digital. Look, NFC cards are working quite fine here, and so on. So you have all the assets. Perhaps what you should first be proud of you, and don't be afraid to launch your own things on not only being the suppliers of everybody else. Go abroad, and sorry, speak English every time. I know it's difficult. We have the same issue in France. Nobody wants to speak English, but we have to push. We have to push the people. That's key. Even if we love our French language, business is English. And so be global, go everywhere. I see Polish people in many events, not enough. You are a big country, you do a lot of things. You should be more often in these different things. And to conclude on what you said, cooperation is key. We call that, in my event for 3 years, we call that competition. So we shouldn't be naive. At the end, we are in competition. We try to take our piece of the cake, but it's a cooperation model too. So it's a kind of new model of competition all over Europe and between us as a fintech players.
Great, thanks for that. Time is up, but one last question, and I only want, if I would invest in fintech today, and I want to set up a company or be a traditional player who wants to invest in an area, what would you guys say I should invest in? Lauren first.
Depends if you want to be. If you want to play casino, is blockchain. If you want to play
blockchain.
No, if you want to play casino, I said. Because you can win a lot, but also lose a lot. But perhaps in Europe, where I see a lot of potential, is wealth management. Still a blank area. It's a blue ocean. You have plenty of new regulation coming, and you have a lot of money in Europe on wealth management. Not in US, it's credit. In Europe, money is savings.
Beautiful. Sam.
I'm going to be traditional conservative, as I should be.
As a Brit?
Yeah, as a Brit and as an investment management firm. Payments, and specifically scalability and being able to process millions of TPS rather than thousands, because when the Internet of Things comes online and machine-to-machine payments are happening, we're going to need that, and none of the banks are ready.
Beautiful. Follow that, and hopefully you have just created a few millionaires out there. Beautiful. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Just last word, I'm waiting on all of you Paris
Paris,
FinTech Forum
exactly.
next January.
Next January.
29 and 30 of January. You have the book outside to present all the FinTech we had this year, and next year perhaps your FinTech will be
Exactly.
Just
Hopefully
contact me.
more people from Poland on the
I'm
stage.
there for today. Contact me if you want to be in.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dziękujemy, szanowni panowie, za